Fellas, it's Monday. It's our posterior focus day. Third pull day. Pulls from the floor. A little bit of, fuck, Vern, I can't do this right now.
It was a great session.
Yeah, I'm out of breath. I'm getting old. It's by far the most comprehensive program I've ever been a part of. Definitely changed my life. Give it a shot. Let us know how you're doing.
Let's jump in this. So starting on the ground with these Shinbox rotations, the exercise that we're first going to do is the Shinbox rotation with a get up, but just kind of moving through internal and external rotation to start before he adds in that hip lift. So now go into that hip lift, DJ, kind of drive up, squeeze your hips. So now we're kind of moving, getting into these precarious positions, loading these externally rotated hips from this knee bent position. What are you thinking about when you're moving through these?
Think about creating stability in that glute as I go up. I'm firing off as much as I can, so I'm not going to be sloppy at my hips, and then I feather it off, kind of just relaxing the contraction just a little bit so I can settle back into it. And then if I feel a little sticking point, I'll just slow it down even more. That way I'm deliberate with the stretch. I'll slow it down. I can kind of feel that rear glute getting a stretch, and I'll just hold it for a second. Maybe 2-3 inches off the ground, and then rotate it back over.
This is definitely one of those exercises that you kind of see all across social media, but watching DJ do this, this is pretty textbook in my opinion. He has no momentum as he's moving from the ground or to the ground. As you can see here, he's kind of drifting down with control, feathering it, as he says, and then from this bottom, feathering and going. We don't want to use momentum and just throw our body up or crash down to the ground, almost like a fish in a boat, just kind of flopping around. We want to control all of that range of motion, receive it, roll over, challenge that rotation, load, and up through.
You and me were talking about it before, being able to get off the ground without utilizing your hands.
Exactly.
Like, how are you going to get up from here? It's like, how am I going to do it? If I just really contract myself, really force my hips. And for me, I'm thinking about flexing my right hip flexor and then point it where I want it to go. So I squeeze and then allow that opposite glute to drive me where I need to.
You're driving both legs though, right?
I am.
Yep.
But for me, because I've always been plagued with hip issues, this thing's a game changer for me. Motion is lotion applied daily. This is one of the movements I really get a big benefit out of.
So for this next movement, we're going to the lateral bridge, focusing on a scissor setup so we can get adductor involvement. So this is a pretty traditional lateral bridge, a lot of emphasis here on this lateral line, but we're going to take this top leg over, kind of put it in this position here, and I'm going to emphasize DJ driving his right leg into the ground, getting this bite on the adductors here. So from here, he's having that same setup. I'm trying to use this left leg a little bit less, as little as possible, really trying to emphasize this right leg. Bring this right leg back just a little bit, DJ. So from there, and just driving in, lifting the hip, holding this isometric bridge, really trying to build the foundations for that pelvis with the adductors. We constantly overlook the adductors. This is a setup that can emphasize that area quite very well. What are you thinking about when you're here?
I'm trying to contract my obliques as much as possible. And then if I leave my foot rotated over, it's like a roundhouse kick, I don't really get it.
Yeah.
But if I rock it up on its side, I feel like I can actually get some pressure and I can really drive that thing in. And as soon as you feel it, it's kind of like a certain movement in the gym. You won't feel it, and all of a sudden you'll change 3/4 of an inch. A little more emphasis, you're like, that's what it is. For me, that's a drive. If I have my foot here, I don't really feel it. If I rotate it over and then I drive it down, the inside of my foot and kind of that ankle I pressed in,
yep,
I can really feel it.
How high do you feel the bite in your groin? Like, do you get it up there, like pretty high?
Yeah, I mean, you really feel it right next to the knee, but
yep,
if I really emphasize, drive the whole thing in.
Perfect. He's kind of getting that high hip setup, his elbows underneath his shoulders. He's in a safe position here, stacked, heads up, pushing my hips forward still, getting that slight extended pattern, and then from there just driving that top leg into the ground. That last movement was really focused on the adductors, pretty prevalent with internal rotation. Now we're going to go with this glute mobilization here, more focused on external rotation, using the ground as a constraint to contour around. He's going to straighten this right leg back, really try to strengthen this glute here, isolate this movement that's occurring here. He's setting up that left arm to kind of create a block with his chest so he's not donating mobility from that lower back, really trying to stay tight through his core, and he's just contouring around, touching his toe on the backside, bringing it around, rotating, tapping his heel. We're just kind of going through these movements, exploring this rotation, really trying to stay as tight as he can through his torso without donating mobility. Remember, more isn't better here. You really just trying to stay as locked in and isolate the rotation that's occurring right at this hip is what we're looking for.
What are you last cueing? Like 2 or 3 inches of this movement, really where you feel it.
Where are you feeling it? Can you touch it?
High in the glute.
So kind of top glute area?
Yeah. When I get down to the 4 or 5 o'clock position, start to get tight. Right when you hit about the 3 o'clock position, it's like, there it is. Now, if I can just get one more inch. So I pick an imaginary spot. kind of to where it goes. And then on each rep, I try to get back just a little bit further, but an emphasis on where that heel is going to strike.
Yeah.
Not just haphazardly just swinging this thing around. Start to contour your body to make the distance shorter. Try to make it harder than it is. Really try to ground in, lock my tricep, lock my shoulder, not donating mobility.
We're just using our body to create leverage on tissue and just use different shapes, different positions to kind of isolate movement to really try to improve the mobility of our body to create more durable, robust joints. No such thing as preventing injuries, but if we can prepare tissue as much as possible to hopefully mitigate their prevalence, that's what we want. So we did our ground prep, so now we're going to get more explosive with that posterior chain as we build towards that trap bar deadlift. We're going to go with a traditional kettlebell swing here, bilateral setup, really focusing on driving the hips forward. He's got his feet good shoulder width apart here. He's going to slightly hinge back, gain down to this kettlebell, lift it up, slide back into the hips, his first movement, and then he's up through. Load back, hips through. Load back, hips through. I'm really thinking about this concept of not driving my knees back, but driving my hips forward into extension. It's almost like I'm in a repeated jump action using this kettlebell as a sub-maximal effort, because obviously we can go a little bit heavier here, but just this repeated sub-maximal effort, loading his hips back, driving his hips through. Rest. What are you thinking about on a kettlebell swing?
Big toe down. Always try to go big toe down, especially on that first rock back. My toes naturally want to come off. I'm trying to be grounded. I'm trying to have intimate contact with the ground just for me, for the stability aspect.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying not to let my shoulders raise this thing up.
Yep.
Trying to let the momentum. And my safety blanket for me is activating my glutes. That's how I don't swing it too high. I don't collapse and let it pull through my legs too far. I'm going to go ass over tea kettle. I'm in control the entire time. But it's going to talk about over there, a feathering concept. Driving them, squeezing glutes as high as I can, and then I just release tension. Let it naturally come down to a point where I'm comfortable, and then I just redirect.
Do you feel the weight shift in your feet? Or are you pretty consistent with your whole foot the whole time?
The very first swing always feels a little weird.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I remind myself big toe down, kind of re-engage the entire process. If not, if I just grab and I start swinging, you'll see my toes naturally start to come up.
Yep. That's a cue that I think I give, not I don't say I give you pretty consistently, but something I say quite often. I think it's pretty natural when you start to drift back to kind of just sit back on your heels a little bit. The momentum's taking you back. To kind of stay forward on your foot is definitely a hard thing to stay connected with, especially when we're pulling. I mean, this is an 80-pound kettlebell, but we're swinging that 150. It's definitely a lot more difficult.
It is, and that's really where the injury comes for me. It doesn't really matter on the weight. It's, do I let my whole posture collapse? We get down the bottom, you see guys are just trying to shoulder raise this whole thing, or they'll get down here, hopefully I don't hurt myself, and they'll kind of just let the whole thing go.
Yep.
Too much of a bend in the knees. Now they're all the way over here, trying to redirect. Try to keep my eyes in kind of a neutral position. And then just keep it on that same line. So I'm not letting my head go between my legs.
I think a big thing here with DJ doing this is he's staying packed here as well. He's holding this kettlebell as an extension of his body, but he's locked in. His lats, everything's nice and tight here. He's staying rigid, so everything, all this force that he's producing, he's managing it every time. He's managing it as he descends down, and then he's applying it on his way up. There's no lost sense of, oh, I'm getting loose here. You're in control of every bit of that range of that movement. So that's moving fast, that posterior chain, high velocity. Now we're going to use that as a prep movement to build towards a trap bar deadlift, picking up something a little bit heavier, but slower velocity. Next movement is going into a heavier strength movement with a trap bar deadlift. Similar shape, similar pattern that we're loading, but obviously a lot slower than the kettlebell swing, but obviously we can go with a heavier weight here with this setup. We're gonna go with elevated plates here. This is something I've been really big with pushing with DJ, just from his lower back, and obviously his body type, your anthropometrics that you have. He has a very long torso, whereas if I had him go from the floor, it's gonna put that low back in a weird spot. And I want him to be able to pick up something heavy, forceful, push away the floor. We really go with this elevated setup with some plates, but this is definitely something I don't think we've trap bar deadlift from the floor in a very long time.
It's been a long time. Well, I mean, it's injury prevention. I'm trying to go 52 weeks out of the year, and I've thrown my back out so many times, but I'll tell you what, knock on wood, wherever it is, not in the last 5 years, not since we held locked in together.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really my main concerns. I'm not ego lifting here. I mean, we pull heavy off the floor, but if I can safely do it off, a 2 or 3 inch platform, I'm doing that so I don't have to miss a session because I tweak my back. Because I will, man.
Yep.
Like those last 2 or 3 inches, and I'm not gonna pull my shirt off, but I have a really long torso and my legs don't match it. So when I get down to my last 2 or 3 inches, there's a long way to go, and it's really, really hard for me. And with the injuries I have, to really keep in control. Those last 2 or 3, I feel like I give it. And if I don't take the slack out of the bar, I jam myself up sometimes. So this safety mechanism for me personally.
So DJ is going to step in there. Obviously, this is different than a traditional RDL, barbell RDL, which is purely a hinge pattern. This is kind of in the middle of that squingy setup, kind of squatty, kind of hingy in the middle, but it's an athletic setup. If I was swinging a kettlebell, I'd be in this position. If I was jumping, I'd be in this position. And the trap bar, you're in that loaded position, but we can load this with weight. Let's kind of set this up. Feet about shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit more narrow here. Hands grabbing the bar. He's getting the slack out of the bar, getting a lot of tension through the bar. He's going to set his scaps. I like an eye gaze about 8 feet in front of us, so I'm kind of looking at the ground the whole time. I don't want my head to change positions. And from here, we like to cue this with a push. Even though we're pulling something from the floor, he's rigid and he's pushing up through the floor. Controlling back down, pushing, driving his hips, no different than he does his kettlebell. He's letting his hips slide back, pushing his hips through, finishing nice and tall. Drive. Control it down, reset. I like the sound of DJ deadlifting because you don't hear the bar yank to the top of the plates. We got a little bit of space in between our plates, but you don't hear that yank. You feel him, or I can hear him connect the dots. I know if it's going to be a good pull right away because I don't hear it. I hear you get to the top of the plates, I hear the slack come out, and then it's just pushing and driving.
Especially with the shoulder issues I have going on right now, that little bit of slack, that 1/16 of an inch, whatever it is, that's where the majority of my issues come from when I pull a trap. My shoulders are kind of hanging on by rigor safe and bubble gum. But if I don't get that out, that's where all my issues come. If I just sort of rip this thing off the floor, everything kind of falls apart for me. So if I just take that out just a little bit, 8 feet out in front, push away. Squeeze glutes on the way up, feather on the way back down, nice, slow and controlled.
Yep.
I'm a sucker for a trap bar deadlift.
For DJ's height, for our heights, kind of around the same gym, we're kind of around the same height. The one plate is a good setup. Yeah. If you're taller, I've had work with taller athletes or in that 6'4" plus, I'll go 2 plates sometimes, and even shorter athletes will go none because they don't really need that. But this is just a good setup, pulling from that mid-shin area, pushing the floor away. I really like this. Setting those scaps nice and back, loading our posture, loading our position. It's a good setup.
It really does connect all the dots. From the floor, your grip, your shoulders, scaps, lats engaged, ocular cues out in front, everything in unison, squeeze the glutes, press to the floor, up. To me, I love it.
So this is one of our row patterns that we've kind of been exploring probably for the past year or so, just something to kind of integrate that hip, challenge our hip mobility, that connection from the hip to the foot. Obviously, we're going to lose a little bit of stability, so not a pure traditional row, but we're not trying to look at just every movement from a bodybuilding aspect, but also from a functionality. So let's go with the single leg hinge, DJ. He's going to find a base of support out overhead. He's going to go right leg on the ground, right hand rowing, so that same side movement, that ipsilateral setup. And from here, he's going to set that left glute, kind of locking his hips into place, right big toes down on the ground, and he's rowing back to his hip. Rowing back to his hip, reaching back down. Rowing up to his hip, reaching back down. Everything staying locked in. Pelvis stays square to the ground. Letting that scap move as he reaches. Good integration from the spine to that shoulder. Letting that scap move from that reach position. Driving that elbow back to the pocket. He's driving his big toes down to the ground. Really letting the hips sit on the impulse of every row. Reach. Money. What are you thinking about on that setup?
How much I like the balance aspect.
Yeah.
Like I was always a sucker for a bent over row, really getting some momentum, really generating some force. But for this, it's like you always say, connecting all the dots. And balance is a huge thing in life. It's a huge thing in tactical population, just life in general. And for this, being able to stand on one leg and still be able to move a considerable amount of weight under control, not use momentum. That's why I love it. My core's got to be engaged. Rear leg's got to be engaged, glutes got to be engaged, flat, scaps, all it's got to work in conjunction. I really like that. It's probably my favorite back exercise we do.
Yeah. Depending upon the training block that we're in, we'll do conventional rows where we have big bases of support, but this is something we like to sprinkle in when we're moving something heavier from the floor to give us that stability aspect, something that's more core oriented, more focused on connecting the dots between the foot, the hip, up into that shoulder. All right, for this hamstring bridge with pullover march, he's going to start from this supine position, laying flat on the ground. He's going to tilt his pelvis underneath him, almost like he's trying to scoop his butthole up to the sky. He's going to lift his hips up in the air, toes are towards his shin, tensions on his hamstrings because we're at a greater than 90-degree bend of the knee. And now he's going to create some upper body tension with this banded setup here, drawing his lats down. Everything's nice and tight and engaged. And from here, he's going to take times alternating his heels, marching, bringing that knee up to his hand. Every time he brings that knee up to his hand, he's really trying to focus on keeping his pelvis square where it's at and not allowing it to drift and rotate side to side. Really trying to stay as symmetrical as possible, almost like he's swimming on the ground. Everything around his spine is staying purposely where it's at. Everything's locked in. He's creating tension. He's driving his glutes. He's driving that hamstring, really trying to march each side, alternating legs side to side. What are you cueing with this setup?
Engage into my lat to create stability that I can. And I'm trying to keep my feet equidistant. So every time I bring them up, I'm trying to drive the opposite heel into the ground. Don't let my knee sway out to and fro. And then as soon as I place it, I can't relax any kind of tension. If you do, it'll pull you outside of. So really just creating the stability. As soon as I bring it back down, it's like, don't let it move, don't let it move, don't let it move. I'm really just picking a channel right in line with my two knees. Can I stay inside of this? It starts to drift out, starts to get away from me. How do I create stability? With my lats anchored into the ground. With my heels.
What are you cueing in this setup to not feel nothing in your lower back? Because that's something people, when they do posterior bridges, they're like, I feel this in my back. What are you cueing?
Glutes.
Glutes.
Constant tension on the glutes. If I really just try to push myself up and I'm not engaged with them at all, then I'll start to feel in my lower back.
Yep.
That's how I know I'm doing it incorrectly. My glutes are really locked in, really engaged. Now each one's moving independent. For me, I don't feel in my lower back at all.
For me, it sounds weird. I'd almost try to pull from underneath my butt cheeks. Like I'm trying to drive from the bottom of my butt cheek and not like my glute, because I just can't connect the dots between like driving my whole ass. But if I can lift from like the top of my hamstring, bottom of my glute, I rarely feel it in my lower back.
Yeah, same.
So placing some more capacity work into our posterior day, we're going to go with some dynamic movements. We're going to challenge position and posture, and then we're going to get that heart rate up even higher, try to fatigue those positions as we move into these pillar posture positions. We want to be able to hold our position, our spine, our posture good, not just when we're fresh, but also when we're fatigued. Form breaks down when we're fatigued. We can challenge those attributes inside the gym.
Same kind of stuff we do on the range. We run a little stress course, maybe guys run 100 meters.
Exactly.
Now we're on a 6-plate rack. It's the same thing. Now we do the exact same thing in the gym. But for me, the focus is, can I do all the exercises correctly in the proper form without letting my ego get involved? And now I tweak something. It's a one movement to the other movement to the other movement. Keep going back and forth, but is it good form to good form to good form all the way through? I'm not going to be able to speak to this whole thing, but it's kind of the whole point.
That's the point.
Trying to get my heart rate elevated as much as we can. That's what everybody asks. What do you do for hard cardio? And lift weights faster. And then we do breath hold training. It's the same thing, man. But for me, really good use of movement, generating power off the floor, grip, cardio, everything just combined into one. As long as I'm being safe, it's all good.
Yeah, let's get into it. So going with a double dumbbell swing here as we load these positions, DJ is going to be violent and he's going to be vertical. He's going to load back into his hips and he's going to take this straight up overhead. Loading into the hips, straight up overhead. We're going to get 8 of these, loading back to the hips, driving up. He's connecting the dots with his big toe down into the ground, squeezing his glute to the top so he's not extending in his lower back, taking these dumbbells up overhead as he receives them down into his hips, redirects them back up overhead. Let's get one more. Money, sit those down. Violent, getting our heart rate up. He's still trying to be in control of what his heart rate's doing. Then we're going to immediately go on a short rest into a farmer's carry. Here's going to be nice and tall, holding that posture, owning each step, feeling those toes roll through extension, squeezing his glutes as he's walking. We're going for roughly about 30 feet here. Trying to make sure he keeps his feet on those equal train tracks so he's not walking on a balance beam. Sitting them down safely, safe into an exercise, safe out. And then from here, we're going to jump in and get a little bit more dynamic, getting our heart rate up in a more controlled environment using a bike setup with this movement. Your mic is on. Don't breathe too hard. We're going to have DJ go all out for 20 seconds using a bike setup here, wrestler's bike. This isn't fun.
No. Ready?
Go for it. Jerry. Good. Reset. Reset. As we walk back to get the next set, big thing I try to push when it comes to training is resetting each time. Instead of trying to say rest so much, trying to get that aspect of reset. Reset the system. The faster we can get back online, the better we can be more prepared for the next bout, whether that's in the training room, on the range, whatever it is. The shorter we can keep our rest so that we get back to it, it becomes more of an actionable item. Resetting, get the system back online, getting back ready to go.
Absolutely. Send it again.
As you can see, DJ just did, he's resetting the system, clearing system, almost like getting that big breath forceful exhale, get things back online instead of you just being there like a labored breath. It's more of an actionable item. Big breath, forceful exhale, reset, back online.
You know the same thing on flat range the other day. Bill drills out of the holster, stress is there, the buzzer. I tell the guys to do an audible breath, like hit the buzzer, bingo.
Exactly.
Reset my system after each one.
It's almost like it puts you in control rather than your breath just being this thing you're constantly trying to catch up. Like, stop. Take your moment. Back in.
To me, posture is a big one too. Across the finish line, you see a bunch of guys, I used to do it too. Stand up.
Yep.
Stand up, be positive. Upright, vertical. Now I'm ready to go.
Good.
I'm going to be able to crush my posture.
Let's get it. Start out smooth, ease into the movement, driving. Taking these dumbbells up vertical. It's almost like a closed hallway. He's not swinging them out far away from his body. He's staying in this closed hallway position, taking them straight up vertical. Just taking almost like that kettlebell swing thought process, that bilateral swing with a more vertical element of taking these dumbbells up overhead as we start to get more fatigued, being safe overhead, locking our glutes, staying tight through our core. Going right into the farmer's carries, everything's locked in, good posture, good position, as DJ said. Fatigue starting to set in, but his posture is getting better. At no point is he breaking down in form. Locked in, taking our time, slowing our body down, really owning these moments, controlled breathing. If we can nasal breathe only, even better. From there, DJ's trying to reset the system quick as he gets right back on that bike. Resetting the system, you kind of hear him breathing through his mic, in through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, trying to get back online so he can give this bike everything he can. Good. Reset. You hear DJ breathing, resetting his breath. He's in control of the moment. He's in control of his body, really trying to make the most of these rest periods. They're a little bit shorter with this sort of capacity movements compounding on top of each other. So we're just trying to manage fatigue, control our posture, as DJ said.
Fellas, it's Monday. Any more questions you guys have, check out the GBRS Performance Program. Keep following Vernon. Building every day for 5 years. It's by far the most comprehensive program I've ever been a part of. Definitely changed my life. Give it a shot. Let us know how you're doing.